Welcome again, everybody. I've got 12:01, so I'll get us going, and a few more people might come in the next moment or so. Welcome. I'm Steve Grum. I work as Legal Aid of Western Michigan's Community Engagement Director, and we are very happy that you've joined us for Criminal Record Expungement 101. Just before I turn things over to our presenters, I want to quickly but wholeheartedly thank the Grand Rapids Bar Association for helping us to produce the program for free. And I want to thank all of you for joining us. By way of a little bit of context, many of you know already that Michigan became a clean slate state in 2021, and that essentially made criminal record expungement an option for thousands more Michiganders who made a mistake, paid the penalty for it, and now want to move on without the shadow of that criminal record following them around. So at Legal Aid, the reason that we've engaged in this in the past year is that we view this as an economic empowerment tool. This helps our clients with expungements ultimately become stronger job candidates, better applicants for stable housing, and even in some people's cases, this is just a matter of being able to volunteer at their child's school without a decades-old conviction getting in the way of that well after they've changed their lives and moved on. So whether you're doing this for your own practice or you're interested ultimately in volunteering with us, we are grateful for your interest and your presence here all the same. And if you do want to volunteer with us, you join us at a time when we're surfing a very large wave. I noticed that our expungement case closure rate went up 268% in 2021 against 2020. So we love that we're busy, but we would always welcome the help. And with that, I am going to turn things over now to our trainers. First, my colleague, Noah Joseph. Noah is the supervising attorney, one of my teammates on the pro bono program. And I'm really thrilled also that partnering up with Noah is Chuck Burpee of counsel at Warner Norcross and Judd. That's his formal title within the walls of Legal Aid. We call Chuck our pro bono expungement rock star. And we are really, really thrilled that Chuck's with us this afternoon too. So I'm going to shut up and I'm going to turn things over to Noah and Chuck.
Thanks, Steve. All right. So first of all, I just kind of want to do a quick overview of today's training and then the training on Friday. I know a lot of you are registered for both. And if you are only registered for today, feel free to register for Fridays as well. Today, we're going to do more of an introduction. What is expungement? Why do we care about it? And I'm continuing to admit people from the waiting room, so I apologize if I am pausing every couple seconds here. What are the basics of the new law? And then ways that you can get involved. Steve already talked a little bit about that, the wave of expungements that's coming. So there are some different ways that you can help if you are so inclined. And then on Friday, we're talking about the nuts and bolts of a case. So what it is from start to finish, from meeting with clients, filing the application, reviewing iChats, what the hearing is like, and then specifically some of the issues of taking cases from legal aid. So feel free to reach out if you would like to be added to the list for that training. And for those of you who are registered, I will be sending an email out tomorrow with that Zoom link as well. Okay, so what is expungement? Many of you already may be familiar with this, but I just kind of want to make sure that everybody's starting off from the same page. So expungement is the setting aside of a conviction, and that means removing it from the public record. If a conviction is expunged, a person can answer no to questions about convictions on job and housing applications. And that's one of the biggest barriers is when someone has to check that box on a job application that they have a criminal record. So if we're able to clear that, that's a huge help. And expunged convictions should not show up on any background check. So this is not just if somebody runs their iChat, which is the criminal record check in Michigan, but other background checks, it should be eventually wiped off all of that. What does expungement not do? So it doesn't clear anything from a driving record, and that is important, which we'll kind of touch on a little bit later today. And then it does not clear convictions from the non-public court or police records. There are certain agencies and courts and police that will still have record of that conviction going forward. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Chuck for the next couple slides.
Thanks, Noah. Hello, everyone, and I want to add my welcome to the welcomes of Steve and Noah to this program. Thanks for your interest in learning more about expungements. I've been doing this for about a year, and it quite frankly is the most rewarding work I've done in my career. And I hope that you will consider getting involved and hopefully feel the same way about it. Some rather striking statistics to begin with is that 1 in 3 Americans has a record that will show up in a criminal background check. That to me is just absolutely astounding. Another statistic that I heard recently is that over half of the unemployed people have a conviction that is eligible for expungement. And obviously their positions can be greatly improved if they were to get that expunged. In Michigan, there's a relatively small percentage of people who actually pursue the process even though they're eligible. And that's because of several reasons. One is lack of awareness. This is a relatively new program. The news is the availability of the expungement process is still getting out. The second one is lack of resources. That's not a surprise. That's in the legal world in general, but that is where you can come in, along with the lack of legal assistance. And legal aid has staff attorneys who do this and do it well, but they really would like to be able to multiply their reach by getting pro bono attorneys involved. Next slide, Noah. It really, as Noah mentioned, it really helps people who have served their time and paid their debt. When I talk about this process to people, my colleagues, and I talk about how people are still haunted by convictions that are 20, 30, 35 years old. People simply can't believe that those convictions are still on their record. But that's one of the problems with this digital world is once something is there, it's there a long time. So this process for getting those convictions off records is literally life-changing. Some of the things, it improves access to housing. It improves access to employment. It improves the ability to start a business or maybe just more generally access to money through loans and otherwise. And it also improves one's ability to volunteer at school or wherever. I have a fairly recent pro bono client, and she bumped into it most recently because she wanted to work with children at her church. She was volunteering to do so. They ran the background check, and lo and behold, she had some convictions that are about 20 years old that were problematic. I've just been astounded at the number of ways that the convictions can impact somebody's life. And then one last statistic right at the bottom of the slide there is, believe it or not, a person's wages go up on average about 25% within 2 years of an expungement. So that's really remarkable. And it's like, how can we not help people when you see those kinds of numbers and the kind of impact we can do? So next slide. As many of you likely know, the old law was fairly limited in that you could expunge only 1 felony or 2 misdemeanors. And there was a 5-year waiting period. That certainly was better than nothing, so to speak. But the new law is much more robust, and it came into effect last April. It's also more complicated, which often goes along with being more robust. But it opens the doors, as Noah said, for thousands, maybe millions of more people to be eligible for expungement. The law also provides for automatic expungement. That will start next year, assuming that funding is found to make it happen. And that's another exciting facet of the program. Next slide. Okay, the new law. We'll go over a few of the basics here. Under the new law, you can have up to 3 felonies expunged and an unlimited number of misdemeanors. That covers a lot of people. There's also an exception to the 3 felony limitation that Noah will speak to in just a bit. But that really covers a very wide universe of people and makes a lot of people eligible. But the rule is interesting. 3 felonies is a bright line. It's not a situation where someone can have up to 3 felonies expunged. For example, if they have 4, can they pick 3 to get expunged? No, under the new law, if you have more than 3 felonies, then you're not eligible for any expungements, and that's one of the limitations on the process. And just a note there, a felony is anything with a maximum sentence of over a year. And then I think it's back to you, Noah.
Yes, thank you, Chuck. And one thing I did not say at the beginning is please let us know if you have questions. Jump in at any time if you would like to. We will have time at the end to answer questions as well. Feel free to put things in the chat. If I don't get to them right away, we'll definitely get to those at the end. So we hope that you will answer all your questions before the end of this. Okay, so what does not qualify? There are several things that just are ruled out of the statute, and that's things like life offenses, most criminal sexual conduct, child abuse, child pornography, and human trafficking. Any traffic offenses that involve injury or death, or are traffic offenses that occurred on a commercial driver's license, are just ruled out. And then operating while intoxicated other than a first. So that's something that is new to the law since the new law passed. So that was added, that you can add one operating while intoxicated. But there are limitations to how much that can help someone, as it would not come off their driving record, which is another thing. So another limitation, assaultive crimes. You can only expunge 2 assaultive crimes within a lifetime, and that would include any felony or misdemeanors that are considered assaultive, and those are listed in the statute. We won't go into everything that is included in that, but anything that's assaultive would apply for that. You can only expunge 1 felony for the same offense if it is punishable by over 10 years. So that's another limitation on the number of felonies that can be expunged. We had a recent case that was involving 2, I believe they were 2 drug felonies over 10 years. And we made the argument that it's the same statute, the same everything, but they were 2 different drugs. And I believe we were successful at making that argument. And so they both qualified for expungement. So that's one of the areas of this statute that I don't know, I wouldn't exactly call it gray area, but there's room for argument. And that's where a lot of these cases, a person really benefits from having an attorney by their side to make those arguments. Another limitation is you cannot expunge a felony domestic violence if there has been a previous misdemeanor for domestic violence. And then with traffic convictions, there are a couple limitations. It applies just to the criminal offenses, not civil infractions. And then again, like I started to say in relation to the operating while intoxicated, it does not change the driving record. So getting that expunged doesn't really help getting a driver's license back if that's the goal, or it doesn't remove it completely. It removes it from the criminal record, but not the driving record. So that's something you have to think about as we're looking at what someone is trying to accomplish. Okay, a big part of the new law is waiting periods. This is based on different studies that were done to show when people commit crimes again. So if people have made it through certain waiting periods, they're less likely to commit new crimes. So it's very important to look at that, and we'll go into the different places that waiting periods come up. But what does the waiting period mean? So when you're applying for an expungement, you look at the most recent court interaction. So whichever is the last to occur between a sentencing or conviction date, a release from incarceration, or release from probation or parole. And if you're applying for multiple convictions, generally you would look at the last date of the last conviction to start that waiting period. So if somebody has 3 convictions in 1 year, as long as that waiting period is met from the last conviction, generally that would qualify for expungement. I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute about why I'm saying generally. And then the waiting period itself for applications, so not for automatic, but for the applications part of expungement, it's a 3-year waiting period for non-serious, non-assaultive misdemeanors, 5 years for serious misdemeanors or a single felony, and then 7 years if there are multiple felonies on an application. As Chuck mentioned, there's one exception to this. Really impacts felonies more than anything else. It's not limited to felonies, but that's where it really comes into play and is necessary, this exception, the one bad night rule. So what that means is if somebody has 2 or more convictions, they can sometimes be counted as a single conviction. They have to have occurred within a 24-hour period and have arose from the same transaction. And they do not apply to assaultive crimes. They do not apply to crimes involving a dangerous weapon. And they do not apply to, the exception does not apply to crimes that carry a maximum of more than 10 years. So why would this be important? If somebody has, they could have 4, they could have 7 felonies. If a number of those felonies fall under this rule, you can group a number of them together as one, and then they would qualify for having three felonies and be eligible for expungement. I think this is a good exception, but in our experience, we have not seen it a lot. There's so many things excluded from it, but it's definitely something that there are going to be cases that it really makes a difference for someone. So that's important to know. Some of the issues that we've seen since dealing with the new law are different court interpretations. So when I said generally, the waiting period the law is not written as clearly as it could be. So there are courts and even judges within certain courts that may be looking at the waiting period per conviction. So if you're applying for expungement of 3 convictions, you would have to meet the waiting period for each conviction, not just the last one. So there are just different things like that different courts and different judges may look at things differently. There are different court procedures, and this can be whether there's a hearing, when the hearing is scheduled, different filing ways you file. So there are some courts that won't even hold a hearing unless there's an objection from the other side or a victim in the case, which we think is great. but it's just it makes it more difficult when there are different courts doing different things. The court hearings, and this goes to the timing issue, can be so far out. The Attorney General is really behind on getting back their responses to people, so they're recommending 6 months out to schedule a hearing. Some courts will not schedule any hearing until they get all the responses back from the state police or the Attorney General. Some courts will schedule a hearing right away, and it might be 3 months out, and then those hearings will have to be adjourned. So there's all these different procedures and differing definitions. This is confusing, and Chuck already touched on this, but it's the idea of what's a felony. So when you're looking at an iChat, somebody will say, this is a misdemeanor. Okay, great. So, they have 10 misdemeanors. That's great. You can, unlimited can be expunged. Well, if 3 of them have a max of over 1 year, even though on your iChat, on your record of conviction, it says misdemeanor, that counts as a felony for expungement purposes. So there are a lot of those little definitions: serious misdemeanor versus minor misdemeanor. All these things add to the complications of the law. And again, so many of these things just lead to, it's really beneficial for everybody that wants an expungement to, if not just talk to an attorney, to have an attorney to help them. But that's where we're hoping some of you will come in and help us out with that. And one additional part of the new law is the misdemeanor marijuana provision. So this is a simplified process that applies to convictions for behavior that became legal in December of 2018. There's no waiting period. There's generally no hearing for these. It's a simplified process. You file the form and it just goes to the prosecuting attorney, and they can object. They can only object based on an argument that actually the behavior was still or would still be illegal today. That's the only objection that is valid against this application. And then no fingerprints are needed. It doesn't need to get sent to the state police or the Attorney General. It's just an easier process for that. All right, and then Chuck mentioned the automatic expungement that is scheduled to go into effect in April of 2023. The difference between automatic and expungement is that many convictions will come off without needing to file an application, but it's limited. So not everything that qualifies for an application will qualify for automatic expungement. So there will always be the application process, because things I believe like assaults will not come off automatically, but you can still file an application. And then there's differing time periods. So the waiting period is 7 years for qualifying misdemeanors to come off automatically, and 10 years for qualifying felonies. So there might be somebody that meets the waiting period for an application, but does not meet the waiting period for an automatic expungement. And so they would want to apply to get their record cleared more quickly than they could with the waiting for the automatic. I'm really interested to see what happens with this. I know Chuck mentioned the waiting to see the funding to support it, but I've already gone through some of the issues and complications and interpretations and definitions, and seeing how that plays out with automatic expungement is, I'm interested to see how that goes. I'm sure you all are too. So hopefully it's almost a year out now. So it's going to be here sooner than we know it. Okay, so now we are going back to Chuck. And you're muted, Chuck.
Talk about a rookie Zoom mistake. Okay, now we get to the point where we talk about how you can get involved if you're so inclined, because there is a lot of work to be done here. And there are basically three ways we'll talk about. One is reviewing ICHATs, which is the screening process for eligibility to determine whether an individual is actually eligible for expungement. The next one is to help at expungement fairs and clinics. And the last one is to actually take pro bono cases in the area. So let's talk about reviewing ICHATs. ICHAT is a piece of jargon in this area that I had to learn. I come out of the patent trademark world, so I had to learn a fair amount of lingo. But an ICHAT is a record maintained by the Michigan State Police of all convictions that are reported to them. So it's really the starting point. The legal aid pulls the ICHATs, and then of course they need people to review those to actually determine the eligibility of the individual. So it's a threshold issue. They're often done in preparation for expungement fairs or clinics. We have been learning as we go through this process. And when the initial fairs and clinics were conducted, there was no pre-qualification before people showed up. They could just show up. And what happened was there were a lot of people who simply weren't eligible. So there was a lot of kind of wasted, wasted is perhaps too strong a word, but there was a lot of lost motion in having to review ICHATs of people who were not eligible. So it helps the events work better because people are pre-screened, so they can feel confident that if they've been accepted to go to the fair, they are eligible and an attorney can work with them. Conversely, it also makes better use of the attorney time at the fair because an attorney knows when someone shows up at their table or desk that it's someone genuinely eligible and they'll be able to help that person. So it's really a much more efficient process. Kind of pros and cons for reviewing ICHATs. One is it requires a fairly good knowledge of the new expungement law that we've been running through to determine that initial eligibility. What's a felony? What's not a felony? Does it qualify for the one bad night rule? Those kinds of issues. So it can be, kind of a heady way to start, but if you're comfortable with the law, it's a good way to start. Another downside from my perspective is you don't have direct contact with clients through this process. You're reviewing ICHATs, which are PDFs or paper, and you're not working directly with individuals. But it's also high volume work. I mean, when you're reviewing ICHATs, you can probably review 5 to 10 ICHATs for every individual you could help at a clinic. So it's higher volume work, so to speak. Next slide, Noah. Then the next thing is to actually help at an expungement fair or clinic. This is generally a one-time commitment, although we certainly welcome people being repeat participants at clinics. It's typically a half-day shift, 3 or 4 hours. The clinics often run all day, but the shifts are split in two, so you just work half a day, whatever works best for you. And you meet with clients who are seeking expungement. And under the evolving model, as I mentioned, they typically have had their ICHAT reviewed so that they are indeed eligible when they appear at your table, and you can help them actually complete the application. You review the ICHAT to confirm that the screening was correct, determine the courts you'll need to file in. The applicant or the clients/applicants also come with the certified copies of their convictions. So they've taken that step, which is a document you need to file with the application as will be discussed on Friday, and you help them complete their application. A real benefit of getting in through this avenue, at least in my mind, is the ability to work with another attorney. Or when I first got involved, I worked with a law student. So at my first expungement fair, A second year Cooley Law student was paired with me, and she was actually the more experienced of the two of us. And not only a very knowledgeable person, but delightful to work with. We had a great time together. And that was a real educational process for me because she could walk me through those, seems like innumerable questions when you're first getting involved in something about how it actually operates. So I think that was a real plus that you can have the buddy system through that way. And the other benefit of the clinics, again, from my perspective, is that you're working directly with people and really have that feeling that you are helping individuals advance through the process. And then next slide, Noah. And then the third and perhaps best way is to actually take pro bono assignments in the area. Obviously, you get to directly represent and work with a client. And my experience has been they are incredibly appreciative. I think these are the most appreciative clients I've ever had in my life. The thanks almost never stop through the process. Obviously, people are much more likely to clear their records when they're represented by an attorney. As we've mentioned, the law is complicated, and the pro se applicant has a difficult time at best completing the procedural steps and the service steps that need to be done through the process. So if they have an attorney, it really helps them out. And as Noah mentioned, courts do things very differently. So it really helps those individuals to have an attorney involved. It's very difficult to give one size fits all advice to them about what to do with their completed application as they move through the process. And because you need to file an application in each court where you have a conviction where you'd like it to be expunged, many of these applicants require multiple applications in different courts. And again, it just really is to their benefit to go through the process. In terms of working with applicants, I just want to tell a couple of stories to give a sense of what it's like and how appreciative they are. I was working with one gentleman, and he had convictions on his record that were about 20 years old. He had convictions in 4 courts, and it seems to be a fairly typical situation. People have problems in their teens and 20s, and then they grow up and they become very different people. And those are the people I've been seeing by and large. So his convictions were 20 years behind him. They had been problematic on and off, but most recently, he had studied to become an insurance agent. And he filed his insurance application with the state of Michigan, and lo and behold, his convictions disqualified him. So he moved to legal aid and did it. This man was a real stoic. I mean, he was a gentleman and a stoic through the entire process. But each time we walked out of court, he would shed a tear as soon as we stepped into the hallway. And his last expungement was also the expungement of his felonies, obviously the most serious ones. And when we walked out of 17th Circuit Court into the hallway after that, he literally broke down and started sobbing right there. And he just said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm doing this." And I, of course, reassured him it was entirely natural and human. But the thanks were just, incredible. And it just made such a difference in his life. My other story is kind of a little more fun or a little more humorous. I've been working with a woman who has had expungements. Hers are 30 years old. Her convictions expunged. And her last one was by Zoom, so we did it together here from my office. And she was just effusive in her thanks. And I walked her to the elevator and said goodbye to her. And as the elevators closed, I mean, just the instant the doors touched together, I hear this, thank you, sweet Jesus, shout from inside the elevator. So this work is just so fun and rewarding. And I just strongly encourage you to get involved in it because it makes such a difference in people's lives.
Well, thank you, Chuck. Those are great stories. I hadn't heard those stories, but it does really make it worthwhile when you're dealing with people that are so thankful. A couple of things to touch on that Chuck mentioned or Chuck said that made me think of a couple other things. When it comes to the way courts are handling things, Zoom, I didn't even mention, is a whole nother issue where, some courts are Zoom, some are not, some judges are Zoom, some are not. There's just so much variety in that. And then also just the receptiveness to expungement as an idea is different. There are some judges that seem to be a bit more hesitant to grant expungements. So it's just hard to know going in. And, with legal aid, we cover our organization covers 17 counties, and the number of courts and the number of judges, it's impossible to keep track of how everybody's doing things differently. I mean, we haven't filed an expungement in every county, I don't think, since the new law passed. We just found out recently that there's a court that most courts require one application for a court, but this court required one application, but they required a hearing on each conviction. So if you file one application with one court, you might have 4 different convictions, and you would have to go into 4 different hearings if they had been under different judges, I think, but each one required a separate hearing. So that's the kind of thing that's just, it's hard for someone to deal with doing this themselves. And I believe there's someone here from the Legal Assistance Center. I know in Kent County, they do a great job of helping people. And I think it's a little easier to keep track of some of the, one county's cases. And so, we definitely cannot help everyone. I wish we could. But that is a great resource for people that we aren't able to help, because there are definitely going to be people who are doing this themselves. But for those of you who are interested in taking a case through legal aid, what do we do to help you? So we do a lot of the work on these cases. When someone comes in, they apply to our services, we do an intake to make sure that they're eligible both for legal aid services, but then also eligibility for expungement. We pull the ICHAT, we review the ICHAT, we look at court records, we get their certified records, we go through all that. We make a decision based on everything that we find, whether the person is eligible for an expungement or not. And we get their fingerprints, we get everything. If we can cover the $50 fee to the Michigan State Police that goes with that, and I say if we can cover, if we have the funding, we have different funding sources in different counties. So, it depends on where someone comes from, whether or not we might have funding. We have a little bit of funding kind of program wide, but specific to Kent County, we had a pretty substantial grant from the Kellogg Foundation that helps us cover more of those. But if we can cover that, we will. If not, we'll get that from the client. So when we are ready to go, that someone has been reviewed and has all their documents and has that check ready to go, then we decide, well, is this an appropriate pro bono client? There are people that are really hard to work with, and we tend to keep those in-house. We don't want to give you clients that are going to make you never want to come back and take another pro bono client with us. So, we do have staff that can take these cases, and they're, legal aid staff is used to dealing with this client population. And a lot of pro bono attorneys aren't as used to it. So we kind of, screen that out. But so when we come to you with a case, sometimes we would even have the completed application. And I know that our staff attorney, expungement attorney, is on this training, Kelsey, and she's going to be leading the training on Friday about a whole case. She does a great job of getting these cases all together. And so when they come to you, they're ready to go. It's file the application and then go to court. It's really, as pro bono cases go, an expungement is just about as simple in terms of what you have to do as anything. So, as Chuck said, his background is not related to expungement. And, he's done some trainings like this and helped at some events. And I would say today that he's an expert. It's he knows his stuff, and he has already, but can speak to the nature of taking this case. He's also taken some family law cases. So maybe if Chuck, you want to jump in. I saw you unmute yourself. The difference in taking an expungement versus some other cases.
Yeah, as I tell so many people, including my colleagues who are increasingly getting involved here at Warner, if I can do it, anybody can do it. It is relatively straightforward. The law does have some complications, but don't let that intimidate you. The process itself is relatively straightforward. Could I add a couple of other things, Noah?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, two other things, but your comments made me think of this. One is, I have found judges somewhere between open and enthusiastic about this process. I've only had one, what I'd call, negative experience with a judge in this process. They all seem to embrace it. And many of the judges will make very nice comments to your clients through the process. Admiration for turning their lives around. They will make your client feel good through the process. Judge Benson told me that within the courthouse there, they call it Feel Good Friday when they hear these motions, because by and large, it does make them feel good. The other thing I want to do is give a shout out to the legal aid attorneys. They're not only excellent attorneys, but they're very supportive. And Kelsey Thomas, whom Noah just mentioned, is simply an outstanding resource and a great support. I recently had a situation where the Michigan Attorney General took the position that what we consider a misdemeanor is a felony. I immediately reached out to Kelsey, and she really, it stronger than helped me develop the argument. She developed the argument for why it was indeed a misdemeanor, and really went the extra mile in helping me. So rest assured, you'll have support. You're not soloing.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. And I was going to say kind of the same thing, that it's a simple process, but when it does get complicated, you're not on your own. So if it comes up that something happens, or there's you get a curveball thrown at you, which does happen. Things that aren't on the iChat pop up, things that the Michigan State Police didn't even see pop up sometimes. And we're here to be a sounding board, to give advice, to help. Sometimes the best course of action is to withdraw an application, because if someone goes in front of a judge and gets an application denied, typically there's a 3-year wait before they can reapply. But going into a hearing, knowing how to deal with that, you can ask the judge to shorten that time period. But sometimes it's better just to withdraw. Sometimes if something pops up and it just disqualifies the person, there's no point going to that hearing. It can only really hurt somebody. But those are the kinds of things that, I'm here to help with, and even more so, Kelsey. She's the expert, and she is great. She's a huge asset to anybody at legal aid and any pro bono attorneys who are taking cases. So we support you every step of the way. We try to make it as easy as possible, because we're in this together and we want to help as many people as we can, and we're limited. And so the more people that take cases, the more people we can help. And let's see. So if you do want to help, so if you are on this call, you got the email from me with the Zoom link. And in that Zoom link, it also included, obviously, my email and phone number on there. But it also included our standard volunteer sign-up form. This is to sign up for any type of pro bono service. Anybody that does pro bono, this is the first step. You get to check what counties you can work in and what types of cases. So this isn't just for expungement, but expungement is one of the options. And then also there is a sign-up form for the May 7th fair. We're having an expungement event. We had one last August, so I know some of you, I saw some familiar folks here today that helped out with that event. This is going to be a similar event. It's at the Center for Community Transformation again. Saturday, May 7th. It's going to be from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We are going to be looking for people to screen iChats ahead of time. So as Chuck talked about with pre-screening, we are doing that. And then taking a shift or two during that event, and then hopefully some folks will agree to take a case after. At this event, unlike recent other events that we've kind of been involved with, we're really hoping to connect as many people as we can with an attorney. So everybody that's going to go through this event is going to be screened for legal aid. We know that there are going to be some walk-ins, and we're going to have be able to help them in some respect, whether it's just provide resources or have them go through our intake. But everybody that goes through our intake and is eligible for legal aid services and meets with an attorney there, we're going to, look through and try to take as many of those cases as we can. And either some will be internal, but most will go to pro bono attorneys. And as we've said, it really is a huge help if we can get them connected with an attorney to kind of deal with some of these unforeseen things that come up, or, to go to the hearing with them. So that sign up form is to sign up both for if you would like to help pre-screen iChats ahead of it, taking a case after, and volunteering the day of. So that should be available. And also, I haven't said this, but this session is being recorded, so it will be made available after this event. But we'd love to have more people come. The more attorneys we have there, the more people we can help. And so we kind of went through this quickly, but we wanted to leave a little bit of time to see if anybody has questions. So please just unmute yourself and ask any questions that you have. And Chuck and I are happy to answer them. And unless you had something else to add first, Chuck.
No, let's see if there are questions.
All right. So, okay. Got a chat question. Oh, well, thank you. That was not a question. It was just a chat to let everybody know how helpful legal aid attorneys can be. So thank you. Thank you, Mary. Anybody have any questions about either the May 7th event or, okay, is volunteering only for attorneys? No. So that sign up form is specifically for attorneys, but if you would like to volunteer, there are going to be a lot of different stations that people go through. So we're going to need people to help people fill out the forms. We need notaries. So if anybody's a notary, we can take volunteers for that. So typically the process is someone will be given a packet. The hope is they've pre-registered. We've reviewed their iChat. We've gotten their certified records. Then they would go and talk to an attorney and fill out their application form or forms. And then we would need people to help make copies of their forms, get them in the right envelopes so they can walk out prepared to mail them to the right places and all that. This takes a lot of volunteers. A lot of those volunteers are not attorneys. So if you would like, I'm going to back up a slide. Well, everybody should have my email address since I sent out the Zoom invite, but just email me if you would like to volunteer, and I'll connect you with folks. Okay. So let's see. Questions. Forms for applications. I'm not sure what, maybe you can, John, if you can give me a little clarify, I'm not sure what that question is. Does it cost money to pull an iChat? So if an individual wants to pull their own iChat, it's a $10 fee. As a nonprofit organization, we have a free account, so we don't pay to pull people's iChats as long as it's for an expungement reason. Does legal aid malpractice insurance cover volunteers? So what we have malpractice insurance, it's considered secondary insurance. So if you have your own malpractice insurance, it's secondary. But if you do not have any malpractice insurance, it is the primary, and it would cover you for any work that you're doing through legal aid. That would be at a fair, an event, or taking a case. So yes, definitely. Okay. I have a client who has 2 felonies and 3 misdemeanors in the same county that are eligible for expungement. Do we file this under one application to be heard in circuit, or do we file an application in district for the misdemeanor and an application in circuit for the felonies? My experience is that most courts do that separately. So you would file one in district, one in circuit. It's not every court is that way. I know like Berrien County has a what they call a trial court system, I think. So everything gets filed together, I believe, on one application. But that is the general way, is that one would be in district, one would be in circuit. There are local convictions which are in the court records but not in state police records. Are those eligible for expungement? As long as they are criminal convictions, yes. So some things will show up as civil infractions, and they look very much like criminal convictions. They can be sometimes even for the exact same thing, but it's considered civil. Those would not qualify. But if it is a criminal conviction, it doesn't matter whether it's on the iChat. It's a conviction, and if it's a criminal conviction in the state of Michigan that qualifies, it is eligible for expungement, even if the state police don't have a record of it. Some great questions here. Thank you, everybody. Okay, let's see. Okay, so there's a question about the difference between something that is on the iChat as a misdemeanor, but it could be counted as a felony for expungement. So, and when we talk about the maximum sentence, it's not what the person received, it's the maximum penalty. So if there is someone with a conviction that is for something that has a maximum of, let's say, 2 years in prison or 2 years in jail, but it's listed as a misdemeanor, it will be a felony under the expungement statute. One of the complicating factors, and this was, I believe, in a recent case Chuck had, is, just one more thing to add to the mix is an attempt can be half of so if the conviction is 2 years, but for an attempt, then it would be 1 year. So the same conviction could be considered a felony if it's not the full conviction versus an attempt that might qualify as a misdemeanor. And I think that's the one. Is that right, Chuck? That the Attorney General took the position that it was a felony, but we argued. I don't know if we've had the hearing yet, but that it's actually a misdemeanor because an attempt has a lower max.
Yes, and also the maximum term had changed since the applicant had been convicted, and I think the Attorney General had overlooked that.
Yeah, that's just one more complication. So it's the maximum penalty is at the time. So if someone has a 30-year-old conviction, it can be difficult to know what the maximum penalty was at that time versus now. It could be an offense that's still an offense, or it could be something that has, is no longer an offense, or it's changed statute numbers, things like that. So that can be complicated. I think I answered that question. But if I did not fully answer that question, feel free to put another chat in. So Moore's question on, does legal aid have a list of counties that hold hearings versus ones that don't? We don't have a comprehensive list like that. There's only one court right now that I know of that does not hold hearings generally, and that is the Wyoming District Court here in Kent County. They hold hearings if there's an objection or if there's a victim in the case. But that's the only one I know of, but there may be more out there. Again, we haven't filed applications in every court in our service area. Another question, does an expungement of child abuse remove entry from DHHS? I'm not sure if there's someone else on here that knows better, but I believe that it does not. Those are two totally separate processes. So expunging the criminal record is a different process than removing an entry from DHHS. What I cannot speak to is I don't know if expunging the criminal record makes it more likely to be able to remove that entry from DHHS. That's just not something I am knowledgeable about. Let's see. And there's a question about whether we're going to be providing a summary of the laws discussed. So if I will be sharing some resources, I'll share this presentation after this session. We have a lot of resources on the legal aid website for pro bono attorneys. It is behind a password. So if you are volunteering as a pro bono attorney, you have access to all of that. There's more than I could probably send out in response to this. I'll send out, I kind of think one of the most useful documents that I could send out is just this one, well, it's a 2-page, what I call a cheat sheet. And it just has kind of statute by statute, and it lists MCL numbers for what's considered a serious misdemeanor, what's considered assaultive, some of those different things. So I can send that out at the end of this. If there's something specific that you're looking for, I'm always creating new resources. I would love to put together a flow chart of eligibility for expungement. It's something I've been wanting to do and just haven't had the time to. I'm not sure I could even do it. It's so complicated, but anything that if you have a specific request for something, let me know, and I can see if that's something we have. I can share that with anybody. Yeah, and Brian has volunteered at these events, and he said that cheat sheet is very helpful. So thanks, Brian. Hope to see you again in May. All right, so I don't see any more questions in the chat, and it is 1:00. So unless I hear any other questions, and again, I appreciate the chat, but feel free to unmute and ask away too. But I think that's good. Well, thank you again, everybody, for attending. I think Chuck may have said this, but I also I love this work. I love working with our pro bono attorneys to do this, and hearing hearing Chuck's stories about the clients that he's helped, just, makes my day. And the more people we can connect, the better. These events are great. Sometimes they can be overwhelming with the number of the people that just show up. But that just shows the huge need there is for more people to help with this. It can make such an impact on people's lives. It can help people's lives. It can help the whole community. I mean, everybody that clears their criminal record is going to be a more productive member of society going forward. And that's just better for everybody. So thank you again for coming today. Hopefully you'll take some of this into your own practice, and hopefully also will look at ways that you can volunteer and help with us going forward. And please let me know if you have any questions going forward. If you need any assistance, if there's anything else I can do to help you, just reach out and let me know. Happy to do that. And hopefully I'll see a lot of you at some of our events going forward. So thanks a lot.